Hi, Yinnies, and welcome to a Yin Yoga podcast. If you are new around here, welcome. For those of you that are return listeners, welcome back. Thanks for coming back. We are going to have a guest interview today, and I'm super stoked about it. I'll talk more about that in just a moment. But before we get to that, I just wanted to share a little bit of podcast love that I have received. This is from Jeannie Wynn. Nick brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to these podcasts for those who practice or teach Yin Yoga. She explores themes with grace, encouraging teachers to consider what and how they teach, and shares thoughts on all things Yin. A highly thought provoking, informative podcast. Thank you, Janie. If you have been listening for a while and you have yet to offer a review, I'd be super grateful if you wouldn't mind taking a couple minutes to go into whatever app you're listening to this on and give it 5 stars. If you're on Apple, you also have the option to write a written review, which is what I just read. This really helps the podcast grow when the algorithms, those nebulous algorithms, see that people are enjoying the podcast. They're taking the time to rate it, that they're subscribing and following. This helps to boost the podcast up. So if you would do that, if you're a regular listener, I would be super grateful. Also, a reminder that this is an adult podcast with adult subject matter. So if you have small people around, please take note of that and grab some headphones. Today we have a guest, a friend and colleague, Dhugal Meachum. Some of you may know Dougal. I'm just going to read his bio. I'm going to try to do it without laughing because Dougal, if you don't know him, has quite the sense of humor. But Dougal practiced Tibetan meditation in the early 90s in Taiwan and Hong Kong while practicing Qigong and Yang family Tai Chi. He eventually started teaching Tai Chi in Hong Kong, but got a little bored with it and later realized it's because he hit compression all over the places in the stances and they were painful for him all, and fell into a yoga class thinking that would be better. He started teaching in the alignment Nazi Anusara yoga. Oh, he's so funny. And then became an ambassador for Noah Maze. Noah Maze is a great guy, but even more alignment. On a trip to Beijing, he was buying fake yoga DVDs one night in a dark alley, and he inadvertently picked up some bald guy's Yin Yoga DVD, and the whole movement world changed. I loved the guy. He's speaking of Paul Grilley, for those of you who don't know. I booked my first training that week in 2011 in Thailand and haven't looked back since. He seemed to serve all of my yoga hits: Qi, yoga, Chinese medicine, meditation. Dougal ran his own little studio in Hong Kong before moving to Scotland in 2015, where he now runs a 500-hour black mat yogi online and in the UK and in Italy. And the program focuses on yin and functional anatomy, an intro to the Tao and to the Qigong, which is kind of like Qigong and some of the Yang practices, a 100-hour Qiology, which is nurturing Qi for 100 hours, and then a meditation course that's 100 hours. And it is much inspired by the Grillies, but more so by the Tao, Zen, Chinese medicine, simply because that's his background and where he finds peace. And I would agree. He also graduated with an undergraduate degree in Chinese in 1996. He has a master's in martial arts cinema. That's amazing. I didn't even know that was a thing. And he's a qualified Yang style Tai Chi instructor along with Qigong. So that's a little bit about Dougal, as official of a bio as you can get with Dougal. I met Dougal, I can't remember what year it was, which of my Paul Grilley trainings, what year, but we were in one of the levels, many levels together. I'm always, a big fan of the Scottish, I must say. He's funny and just warm-hearted, just a genuine good person. And I really appreciated his knowledge on the Taoism and the Chinese aspect of things, which of course I'm not super knowledgeable in. Yes, I studied TCM for a few years, but I have not studied Taoism in depth and certainly don't have anywhere near the amount of knowledge and information on these things as Dougal does. So when I knew I wanted to have an episode on Taoism, I knew right away I had to be with Dougal. So the next time that you hear from me, it'll be myself and Dougal together. Hey, Dougal, thank you so much for coming to hang out with us today.
Hey, Nick, it's really nice to be with you and to be in Canada. Yeah.
Yeah. For those of you who are listening or watching on YouTube, Dougal does not live in Canada, and I do. So when I reached out to him to say, hey, do you want to come on the podcast? And was thinking it was going to be a nightmare with European time zones and my time zone. And he's actually going to be in Canada in a few weeks. So here we are. Before we get into the topic, I would love to just hear the abridged version of like, how did you even find yoga? And I gathered from your bio, which is hysterical, by the way, very much Dougal through the whole thing. So good that you did a bit more of the Chinese aspect first, like the Tai Chi, Qigong, and then did yoga. And okay. So I'd love to hear a bit more about maybe even just how you found, like, what was it about Tai Chi, Qigong, and, China that piqued your interest? We could start maybe there.
Yeah, I think, I know for a little bit from your background how childhood influences what happens in life. And for better or for worse, I found myself in Singapore in my teenage years. My father was a pharmaceutical sales rep selling hepatitis vaccines in Southeast Asia. And so I just got exposed to that really early on. And in Singapore, we used to walk down the street at night eating gorgeous food and walk past Chinese medicine shops. And I just used to look at them and go, it's like hanging, dead snakes and bits of, I don't know, tiger paw or really weird fruits and stuff. And they smelled really crazy and really interesting. And sometimes I'd go out with my pocket money, I'd go and drink stuff from the little store, the old lady on there. I go, wow, that's disgusting. What does that do? Kind of like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. And that grew from there. I had just fell in love with Southeast Asia. My first crushes were local girls at the time. My favorite food still is from there. And when I went to university, my mom said, "What do you want to do?" And I went, "Duh, Chinese." And I didn't want to go to communist China, so I went to Taiwan on my year out. And there I started studying Qigong and Tai Chi and Tibetan Buddhism. Tibetans, all of the political crap that they've had over the last hundreds of years, there's loads of Tibetans throughout Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, and beautiful, beautiful meditation teachers. So I got a bad back from sitting down all the time and listening to them. Qigong in Mandarin because I ended up speaking pretty good Mandarin and had spent some time in Hong Kong, 20 years in Hong Kong after that. And so this is just this natural curiosity of a very, very different way of seeing the world and thinking about the world and experiencing the world. And eventually, I got into my 30s and started doing more formal yoga. And then I started teaching Qigong and Tai Chi in my 20s in Hong Kong. And then I just got bored of it and I just did some yoga. And now here I'm in my 50s and I'm still playing around with all of this stuff. And it's just been a beautiful way of me enjoying life and getting and feeling good about life, feeling good about people. The yogic experience, the Qigong and Taoist and Buddhist Tibetan traditions are really all about being super happy and bringing that happiness to other people. So, yeah.
I didn't know that actually about the large percentage of Tibetans. I mean, it makes sense now. I have a fair bit of Tibetan meditation experience as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's cool. So when did you move from, okay, so you were teaching like Qigong and Tai Chi and stuff before you started teaching yoga. How did you make the journey to yoga and then to teaching yoga?
Well, the really great thing about yoga is, I think in English, when we say yoga, we mean like Indian yoga, like
Hmm.
hatha yoga, vinyasa yoga, hot yoga, etc. In yoga, when you say yoga in Asia, like the Tibetans do yoga. There's something
Hmm.
called the eight Tibetans or whatever it's
Yep,
called.
I've done it.
The
Yeah.
Yeah, the Taoists say that they do yoga. They call it yuja,
Hmm.
which is just a phoneticization of yoga. And so yoga really is often very physical practices to go with the meditation and spiritual aspects. So when I actually say I already felt like I'd already been doing yoga when I'd been doing Qigong. They'd actually go and say our
Mm-hmm.
stretching would be called yoga. Let's do some yoga stretching before we did our Qigong or Tai Chi.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went to do yoga, it was just another flavor of just like, Baskin Robbins, just another flavor of the same ice cream kind of thing. And so when I got into yoga in the noughties and eventually became a teacher trainer in the early teens, um, I already had this big mix of Tibetan meditation, tea and Chinese medicine playing around. And then yoga was just very sexy in the late noughties and early teens
Mm-hmm.
in Hong Kong, huge studios with all the best teachers coming through, like the most famous teachers that anyone would know.
The
And
yoga
so
celebrities.
it was the rock stars of yoga.
Yeah.
And our teacher, Paul, was there. Also, he wasn't very well received because it was too boring. Everyone wanted to be, doing one finger handstands and stuff. So it was just really another flavor, an explanation, and an exploration. I went straight into vinyasa and hatha yoga and became a teacher, then a teacher trainer, and I opened my studio. And I've helped a lot of people. I've helped myself. I think you will agree with me, Nick. We're in it for ourselves primarily to begin with, and we heal ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
and in Hong Kong, it's a big, stressed out city, and people were thirsty. Great Indian teachers coming through there, as I said, Tibetans as well, and international teachers. So it's really a really beautiful place. And I was stressed out suit at the time. I was the China guy because I spoke Mandarin. I had a real job with a suit on. And these ideas and these people I met through yogis and Indian yogis and Tibetan meditation practitioners and Taoists and Buddhists, they're all really, and we'll come out. You talked about yin and yang, you say on this podcast, another episode. It's the yin side to this massive yang experience of business and
Mm-hmm.
achievement.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've realized is we need to spend more time and get really comfortable in that yin aspect of life. And
Mm-hmm.
even when you're doing a one finger handstand or a really intense fast, that's what you're really digging into. You're getting into the rest and relax and recover and refresh and emptiness and all that kind of stuff. They're all just different flavors of the same thing.
I think that being able to speak Mandarin is such a gift. Whenever I'm doing my teacher training and I come across a word, I always apologize immediately. I'm like, I am about to butcher this, but here we go. That was the one class that I wish I would have taken before I dropped out of TCM school, was at least medical Mandarin. So at least I had some, but no, I have none. Um, and now, of course, you are running, and we'll definitely include a link to your teacher trainings and stuff like that in the show notes for anyone who wants to check those out. But now, of course, you're training teachers, and you've got like several different courses that you're doing, which is amazing.
Yeah, I learned my Mandarin by karaoke, if that's any consolation.
So,
That was the way I started. Yeah, singing
uh-huh.
love songs. So I highly recommend that approach rather than medical Mandarin. But
Yeah, it'd probably be
uh,
less stressful.
yeah, I just really, what I find, and particularly post COVID, is people are stressed out. They talk about mental illness. We talk about trauma.
Yeah.
Trauma informed yoga is very kind of buzzy right now. A lot of teachers
Hmm.
talking about that.
Hmm.
And so I started off with a 200-hour yin program, which, functional yin, where variable anatomy, all this stuff. You and I know you are still passionate about it because I watch you on the gram and other places. But then from there, it's just really yin is I talk about three levels of practice using Taoist model, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, but physical, energetic, and psycho emotional.
Hmm.
And the physical practice of yin just begs you to go into being really comfortable with quiet and
Hmm.
stillness. I know from my personal experience in working with teachers and students and modern people that people are not comfortable. Their mental
No.
space is not comfortable with quiet. It's on kind of a endless verbal diarrhea in the brain of I'm good, I'm bad, I don't like this, I'm a bad person, I'm
Hmm.
a good person, you're a good person, I'm a bad person, blah, 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 blah. And so we actually spent a whole 100 hours in there in my meditation part. I'm not aware of too many 500-hour programs that have a whole 100 hours based on meditation, but that's what I do.
Well, they should.
We have a great time in there. I think it's maybe even more popular than the yin stuff. So we do that. And then we have what I call a Qiology, like biology, but Qiology module,
Nice.
which is 100 hours on Qi and seeing the body and the mind and the heart as one integrated thing, which we really can get so much out of if we look after them in a way which
Yeah.
is a very different way of thinking of modern medicine. Though you got a headache, have some aspirin. You got
Mhm.
stomach ulcer, take this. Yeah, it's very reductionist, and I've got
That's
so
such
much.
the Western model, right?
Yeah,
Especially with allopathic medicine to just like
yeah,
that's one of the things I loved so much studying Chinese medicine was this conversation about the root and the branch, about how
mm,
it's, yes, we're going to get you out of pain, but we're also going to look back over here and figure out, well, where is this coming from?
yeah.
Um, yeah. And it's so frustrating to deal with, uh, you know,
And
regular listeners or anybody who's taken my
people
training will
don't
know
think like that. Like,
yeah, it's just like,
so
oh, something's wrong. Here's a little quick fix for that, you know?
yeah. And I do practice acupuncture. And one thing, now I'm in my early 50s. I become by default a kind of a menopause doctor. Just a lot of my patients are menopausal women.
Damn, if you weren't closer to me.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like
And I had one woman recently who couldn't stop having her period. I don't know if happy talking about periods for a minute here, but just by mindfulness practices, this is fire in Chinese
mhm,
medicine.
mhm.
Just had so much fire in her body, and I gave her a mantra, which is basically chill the hell out and just relax. And her period stopped within 2 weeks of just doing that practice. So that's a crazy, crazy idea to
Yeah.
anybody
Yeah.
uh, who's kind of coming from somewhere far left of what we're talking about. But
And I would imagine that you probably often get folks, because this is how I came to acupuncture. I actually came to acupuncture because I have a chronic tight right trapezius.
okay,
And so my chiropractor would adjust me and then he'd be like, and you're out again. Because this was just like not letting
yeah,
go. And he said, you should try some acupuncture. And at the same time, I had been dealing with a bunch of health challenges, which now are basically I know was like totally chi depletion or kind of like a chronic fatigue situation.
mm,
And I'd been going to doctors and getting tests, and they were all like, "You're within the range of normal." And I was like, "But I don't feel
wow,
normal."
yeah,
I'm used to being the Energizer Bunny, and I can't get out of bed. That is not normal. And it was so I went through the right trapezius, but when the acupuncturist did the long intake that y'all do, especially that first one, and I told her that, yeah, well, nobody seems to know what's going on. She said, "That's interesting because in Chinese medicine, that's all the same thing." And I was like,
right.
"Say what?" You know? Yeah, it's just a totally different way of looking at everything, the body, nature, all of it.
And that's the opportunity of, that's why I love yoga. That's why I love meditation. That's why I love Chinese medicine, because it's just a different, fresh to us Westerners, like you, what, huh? Way of looking at things. And it
Yeah,
really works. If it didn't, I'm a fairly sciencey guy.
me too. I always say I have one foot in the woo and one foot in the, nah, I don't know. Show
Yeah,
me your source for that. Yeah.
high five.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but a lot of stuff like this menstrual patient who came to me, just being able to fix her just by meditating is like, what?
Yeah.
And but she's not all the people who come to me often in acupuncture, they've been to their doctor, they've been to their
Mhm.
specialist, they've
Mhm.
been tested up the yin yang, and they're coming to me as like, I this is crazy bullshit, but okay, no one else can help, so let's give this a shot.
Yeah.
And I quite like that position because I don't have to
Yep.
prove anybody. I can just say, okay, well, it's crazy. It's basically voodoo, but here we go.
Let's try it out, see how it
Yeah.
works. That might be a really good segue to start with today's topic. I think it's so interesting too that you did go study TCM because I don't think you were doing that last time I saw you. No. Yeah. And I wasn't and I
not,
oh I
not
was.
formally, no.
I had just started when I saw you. So
Mm.
so interesting how many of us kind of get pulled over that way. But you of course have a background even before your TCM studies in thought, Taoism, just Chinese culture. This is why when I was like, I need someone to just kind of come and give like a Taoism 101, I was like, it's gotta be Dougal. Um, so maybe we could start with that now, just with like how what is Taoism and how is it different? Like why was the philosophy different, do you
Can we
think?
start with a little story?
I have love stories, please. Yes.
So there's a very famous painting in China, which most school kids and adults will know. It's called the San Swan Tu, or the three old vinegar people, I guess you could call it. Three old bitter guys. And it's three men sitting around a big vat, which is a vat of vinegar. And the three men are Buddha, Confucius, and Lao Tzu, the
Mm-hmm.
historical founder of Taoism. And Buddha takes a spoon of the vinegar and puts it in his mouth and goes, "Oh, life is suffering." And anyone who's studied any amount of Buddhism will, that's one of the most famous things. Like, the whole approach to Buddhism is life is, if you don't get life, life can be just seen as just hard, grindy, nasty
Yeah.
suffering, and then you die.
Yeah.
So the Confucius, who's the kind of the most famous, so Confucius takes a sip of the vinegar and goes, that's good, but it needs a bit of this, a bit of that, a bit of that, and a bit of that, and then it'll be better. Confucians are always the fixers. They take something and then we'll make it better again. We'll improve it. It's good, but it needs a bit of work. And Lao Tzu, who's in the back, watches these other two people, and then he takes a sip of the vinegar and goes, "That's good shit. That's good vinegar." Because vinegar's vinegar. It's gonna taste like
Yeah.
vinegar. So you don't need to, it's not suffering. It doesn't need fixing. And I spent a long time with Tibetan Buddhist meditators. You just have to be in China to be surrounded by Confucians. And that's why you have, dragon moms making their kids study dentistry and medicine and engineering and law to be the best to fix the world. So you're surrounded by that. But Taoism is kind of very much the safety valve to East Asian culture, particularly. And you can always see these kind of figures around in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, in Japan, particularly. These are the Zen Buddhists, the ones who just go, you know what? This is a philosophy for people who don't want to continuously fix and change and improve all the time. We have this in the West, and I think we have bohemians and artists and musicians and people who live on, Vancouver Island, and those kinds of folks who, you know what? Actually, if you just leave life as it is, you'll find there's a huge amount of great stuff happening. It's a relationship with the world around us as well. You don't need to, you know, dig up and dredge and make artificial cities. You'll find that actually the ancients and old people and old cultures know how to live with the land very intelligently.
Mm-hmm.
I just find this, I just looked at it living at that time in Hong Kong and in Taipei, big cities, and went, wow, there's people here who have a really, really interesting, relaxed, and what they would call natural approach. And so I got really fascinated by it. And even for them, the Buddhists were working too hard, to try and get realized or to get samadhi or to get nirvana. And they just basically seem to do nothing and then get realized, which I loved as a Yin Yoga practitioner. Do nothing, lie around on the floor, and suddenly your back feels better. So, you can apply this to your whole life as well. So that's Taoism as an idea. And it's just now 3,000 years old as a philosophy. And I love it.
Mm-hmm. I have been really inspired by the the nature base of it.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
I remember when I was in Chinese medicine school, I loved all of the theory that we were presented with. And, in TCM foundations, I know a lot of my classmates were like, huh? I don't get it. And I was like, yes, of course. This makes perfect sense. It just really made sense to me. But it wasn't until we took the 5 element area where I was like, oh, okay, now I've found my heart, because it was just really connecting, instead of just lists of things from a textbook. It felt like, oh, this is now like a circular experience for me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a big thing. The Taoist culture comes out of Sichuan province. Sichuan province is in the southwest. So I think in Canada and around the world now, if you think hot pots, hot
Mhm.
pot food is spicy. This is where pandas come from. It's where bamboo comes from. And the people who were the original Taoists, back probably 3000 BC, maybe into 2000 BC, they were shaman, and particularly Sha women. And these are the people who rain dance. These are the people who look at the skies and go, this is a good time for harvest. This is a good time for a marriage to happen between two powerful families. And books like the I Ching or the Book of Changes came out, the book is a generous description of it. It's probably an oral tradition. It's just a book of solid lines and broken lines in sets of 6. So it could be 3 solid lines and 3 broken lines, which are just yin and yang. So these are the ones and zeros in computing software makes, artificial intelligence, flies people to the moon and does crazy, incredible, complex stuff. Yin and yang is just the simple binary of reality. And groups of 6 of these was an almanac which people use to understand. So, for example, many yin lines would be the darkest day of winter. So 6 broken lines together. Oh, that's a time to bed down and go to sleep and basically do nothing. And so this book was by people who wanted to understand how to gain the power of the universe through their lives. And if you go to Chinese temples, if you ever go to Beijing, Tiantan, the Temple of Heaven, is just one building on a huge open platform. So unlike a Christian church where you go in and are wowed by the awe of God and the power of God, and you bow down before God, you just have this one kind of little building in the middle, and then you have the heavens, the skies above you. And I think you must have this experience where you are in the world. Anyone who ever gets up at a sunrise or sees a sunset or looks at the stars thinks, geez, wow, I'm a tiny piece. And so of a big, big thing. And so Taoism is this beautiful philosophy of allowing us and reminding us continuously and giving us practices like Qigong, like meditation, of not just intellectually knowing that we are a part of something bigger, but feeling it so deeply down and then writing and that actually harnessing that power. And you can see the great teachers that I've worked with they have a twinkle in their eye. They have the energy bunny that Nick says she has when she's on a good day or good couple of months. And those people are lovely people to be with. And they have this philosophy who has their back.
One thing that I found surprising with Qigong, because I came from a yoga background first. And when I had done some Qigong, I was always, in comparison to yoga, surprised at how I could get so warm. And actually, and it takes a lot for me to break a sweat. I'm just not a sweater. And so but I could actually be like, oh, I'm dewy here. What? And yet at the same time, without feeling like I had exerted myself. And that to me was such a pivotal moment in the way that I started looking even at my yoga practice. I come from the Iyengar tradition, the alignment police, long before I found Paul. Luckily, I had only gone a couple years into teaching when I found Paul, and I was awoken to the fact that that doesn't make sense. But I remember that one of the things I always used to hear in my Iyengar classes was to find the place of effortless effort. And I would look at them and think, are you mad? How can I find effortless effort? And I would say that I actually never found effortless effort in yoga until I had the experience in Qigong. And then I was able to go, oh, okay. I see how I can I could do a thing, but without sort of gritting my teeth and white knuckling it and using all my tension. And so I was really surprised. And that's one of the things I loved about Qigong is how I could feel like some of the benefits of doing a really difficult physical practice and at the same time feeling like I wasn't depleted at all. Yeah. So what do you think the difference is in just how that's obviously got to be how the Taoist view of energy, right?
Yeah, you've gone straight to the core of one of the fundamental. When I talked about people lying around and getting nirvana or samadhi, you've gone to the one of the fundamental ideas, which is Wei in a Taoist talk from the Tao Te Ching, which I'm happy to talk a little bit about if people don't know what that is. But Wei is Wu means not, and Wei means action. So it's often translated as inaction. But what Wei is not forcing it.
Mm.
Let's take just for an image in your mind, if you like, of a beautiful tree on a hill. Think of like the most beautiful tree that you could possibly imagine. Maybe it's the first couple of days of spring. The sun's just coming up behind, and maybe there's dew. It rained overnight, and you just look at the tree and go, "Wow, that is a beautiful tree." And in yoga and in the spiritual practices of yoga, we often go, "Okay, well, I want to be Buddha, or I want to be Patanjali. How do I become that?" And you have the Eightfold Path, or you have, yoga's Patanjali's path. Whereas the Taoists go, that's a beautiful tree, but it's a beautiful tree just because it's being itself.
Mhm.
The tree didn't wake up this morning and go, man, I got to do my sun salutations, and then I got to do my pranayama, and then I got to do my neti pot, and then I got to do it just is. And this is lovely. It kind of flows from our variable anatomy, if you like. There's no perfect yoga pose. There's just your pose. And you'll know it is your pose because it'll feel amazing. And there's no goal because chi flows through the universe everywhere at all the time. It's just a fundamental concept of reality. Sun comes up, it rains, clouds go across the sky. There's life and death. This is a flow of energy, of exchange between life and death, morning and night, male and female, good and bad, which just is. And so if you flow with that, this fundamental principle of reality, you'll find that there's a lightness comes into your life. And one of the most famous Taoist philosophers, Liezi, was supposed to be so realized that he didn't actually, his feet didn't actually touch the floor. He just floated. And I'm sure anyone, Nick, that inspires you in life, they're kind of like that. Like it might be a barman or a garbage thrower outer. It could be someone could be someone in your family. I've got a couple of Taoists in my family. They don't even know that they're the happiest buggers in life.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
they're just them.
Mhm.
Just like that tree on the hillside. It's just totally happy and totally comfortable and totally in its own vibe. And you can't go and ask, hey, tree, how can I be as tree as you? It will just go, well, huh? I'm just being me. I don't have nothing to teach you, which is classic Zen philosophy and psychiatry. And this is what the Taoist path is. It's getting so comfortable with who you are deep down that you don't care about, in its most extreme, about money and status and wealth and how good a yoga teacher you are and how amazing your yoga poses are. But people, you are just very, very content. And this is Samadhi in the Taoist sense. And other people look at you and be inspired by you. Um, and I think mainstream characters that people might kind of know are kind of like this, maybe Keanu Reeves.
Mhm.
Is a
Mhm.
kind of guy like he has an age appropriate girlfriend, and people go, "Wow, Keanu!" But I think Keanu is just being Keanu. He's just I found her attractive, and we're a couple now. Uh, there are a lot of people like this. Bjork is another kind of the musician Bjork from. She just kind of makes her own music, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't work. But she's having a riot, and so this is the Taoist. It doesn't have to be an Asian idea. I think we certainly have these, as I mentioned, bohemians and musicians. But it's a counterbalance to that. I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna get that, and I'm gonna be a good yogi, and and the Taoist goes, actually just go to the back of the class, and if necessary, fall asleep, and you'll get to the same path as everyone else did, because chi flows, and enlightenment is just allowing the universe to flow through you and expressing it to you like a star in the sky, or you look at the star and go, wow, that's a beautiful star. So it's a very different paradigm. Often yogis will say it's cheating and it's not really doing it properly. Like they'll just say, but have you done, so if you're thinking yama, niyama, pranayama, have you got to pratyahara yet? And the Taoist will go, what's pratyahara? They'll just go, I feel really good. I had a nice meal. Now I'm going for a nap. And people go, well, you're kind of cheating and you haven't done your 500 hour. And it's a very interesting paradigm, but eventually it's extremely feels so good. And the texts of Taoism and the people who practice Taoism come across as these kind of people who are just, so of themselves.
Mhm.
And again, coming back to our variable anatomy, like we know there's 5 bazillion different caterpillars, there's 5 bazillion different shoelaces. There are five let's take population world, there are 8 billion different versions of Taoist Samadhi, and that doesn't include all the animals and your dog and cat that we often think are enlightened as well. Anyway, so am I making any sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say in my own life, I think that some of this transitioning from this more hatha brained yogic brain into this, not that I can say I embrace the Tao every day, but it is something I do a lot more than I used to. But for me, it actually was getting quite sick. That was the shift for me when I moved from, at the time I had to stop teaching. I was still teaching full time, but I had to stop from my own practice doing any kind of hatha or flow or
Oh,
vinyasa, because I was just too depleted. And so my home practice became essentially yin as my main practice, meditation still. And then on days where I was on my moon cycle or not feeling well, like it was restorative or nidra.
mm,
And having done that as my primary physical practice for about 2 years,
wow.
shifted the whole way that I looked at not only yoga, but also my own practice and what were the goals of my practice. So, like those poses of, do handstand in the middle of the room, coming off the vision board,
Mhm.
um, this like really rigid kind of almost obsessive meditation schedule because, I wanted to become enlightened in this lifetime, softened. And what I came up with at the end of that 2 years was just that I wanted to use these tools to heal myself and to be more at peace and to be a kind human. And
Mhm.
then to share those gifts with other people so that they could be kind humans. And if that's all I accomplished in this life, we're good. It was very interesting shift from from how I was, of course, when I first started doing yoga, where it was like the goal poses and the get enlightenment. And I often say, that philosophy is very like up and out, like transcend your body. We've got somewhere to
Yes.
be. Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah.
Whereas Taoism has just got such a different energy to it. So I'd love, yeah, anything you want to share from, in the time that we have about just kind of basics. If I'm intrigued by this Taoism, but like,
Mhm.
where would I go? That kind of thing.
Well, if there's fortunately, we live in a world where comics are the best way of understanding things. If you want to, I gave my kids Calvin and Hobbes when they were kids, and Garfield and Mutz. I don't know if you know Mutz.
I don't know much. No.
But Mutz, these are all very Taoist comics. Calvin and Hobbes, Calvin and Hobbes.
Mm-hmm.
A little boy, I think he's 6, and his toy tiger, his fluffy tiger doll, and his parents are kind of the Confucians. They're the yogis who are going out to work and they're doing their what are they calling it? They're doing their practice every day. And Calvin just goes out into the snow with his toy tiger and play. And at first, if anybody gets anything out of things like Calvin and Hobbes or Mutz or Garfield, Garfield is just a fat cat who lies in the sun and eats food, and he's probably one of the happiest beings on the planet. That's a Taoist. So you don't have to read texts if you get things out of those kinds of things. But I'll throw in a couple of Taoist texts anyway. So the Tao Te Ching is one of the most famous Taoist texts. And after that is the Zhuangzi. Both of these are probably pre BC. There's great translations of them by Brian Booya.
Thank you for that.
And he has translated my favorite. So when I was in Taiwan as a student back in the 90s, there was this comic artist who was everywhere. And he's now in his 70s. And his books have now been translated into English. So they're comic strips of the Tao Te Ching and of Zhuangzi. Yeah. And they're
I want
really
that.
good. So Brian Booya, Buyia, is translated amongst a couple of other ones. He's done some Confucian texts too. And so I would ask people to just put these next to the toilet and sit. And every time you go for the business, read one of these.
Wait, you mean rather than their phone?
You can get it on Kindle if you really want to, but it might be disrupted. Because this is really a philosophy of letting go. That 2-year process you just described, Nick, is, so to come back to yin yang theory, there's doing and achieving and being and improving and refining. And I have people who come to me in the clinic like this, like high, and they're like high achievers and like, I need to improve my sleep. And I go, okay, well, what's your sleep like? And they go, yeah, it's 4 or 5 hours. And I'm like, that's terrible. 4 or 5 hours sleep is horrible. Yeah, how can I improve it? I've got my Apple Watch on. I'm taking my vitamins. This is all very yang attitude stuff. And I will often say to them, well, the best way to improve your sleep, and sleep is critical for health, happiness. And that's why yin is so important. I think it's where people just become aware that doing fuck all is really powerful. And our culture, where you have to be consuming or producing something to be useful, this just doesn't compute to modern people. Like I used to work in corporate, and people would say I can get by on 4 hours of sleep, so I'm way more productive. And those people now, I look at them and they've had burnout, they're in terrible shape. They might be rich, but their health is a disaster. And so this whole philosophy and those books, those comics I just recommended are all about again and again and again and again and again and again. Go to the back of the class. If you're tired, fall asleep. If you're not sleeping well, probably just sleep more. And if you can't sleep more, well, keep going until you have burnout, and then you're going to have to sleep more. It's going to come to you anyway. I'll tell you another story. In Taoism and Buddhism, there is a fairly contentious and a little bit not very enjoyed by a lot of people who spent years meditating and going from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 to level 4, level 5, and then they get a certificate. Maybe they get like the holy thread. There's one very famous teacher called Huineng, who was the 5th patriarch in Zen. And he's a Zen Buddhist teacher, but he's massively influenced by Taoism. And he said, a student asked him, what's the best way to get enlightened? And Huineng said, there are 2 paths. There's the hard path and there's the easy path. Which one do you want? And the student said, well, of course I want the easy path. Huineng said, are you sure? Because everyone takes the harder path. Like they go to school and then they do level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. But that's for idiots. And when I read this I was a yoga teacher, and I was also in Iyengar like you for a while, I'm an idiot. I've been doing level 1 and level 2 and working on my Urdhva Dhanurasana, or, wheel pose. I still don't feel that enlightened. I mean, I got a good back bend, but I don't think I'm Buddha-like right now.
Hasn't made me a nicer person.
Hasn't made me, and you see this in yoga a lot, right? I've spent a long time with yogis, and some of them are worse than normal people.
There's a lot of assholes in yoga.
And that's not being nice to normal people. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Huineng said, the easy path is just become so clear, so empty, so nothing, that it's like like a lens of an eye. Like you can only see because the lens of your eye is transparent, and then all the light comes into your eye and you can see that. And that's how a Taoist is, becomes so transparent and so light that all of the experiences of the universe come to you, and all of the experiences from inside of you come through, and you're aware of all of that all of the time. What's that movie? Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, or something like that, which was just out last year with Michelle Yeoh, one of my
Oh, I
favorite
haven't seen it, but I will.
martial artists from Hong Kong. So Huineng says the easy path, no one does it because everyone will say, what have you achieved today? Have you deepened your pranayama? What level of samadhi have you got to? But the Taoists will look back and go, I don't understand any of those concepts, because really, samadhi, real happiness is not, you can't put it down in words. You
Mhm,
can't put it down in ideas. If I asked you, Nick, what's a good day? It's a feeling, right? It's
mhm,
when things just flow. Maybe, I don't know, Amos makes you a nice breakfast. I don't know if he ever does that, or just light comes through your window, a good day, have a good class. You can't bottle that, and you can't make a prescription for that. Huineng said the simple path is just being. This is Eckhart Tolle, his whole life on.
mhm.
He's also your side of the country, I think. This is just the power of now. Just be here now. Let everything come to you now in the quiet moment. And then, because Taoism is just one half of the yin yang symbol, it's the yin side. And then you can go back to the stuff. Then you can sleep. And then you go back to your life. And then you
Mhm,
rest. And then you go back. And then these two balance out beautifully, and chi flows in the same way as the sun rises and the sun sets, in the same way as we're young and then we're old, in the same way as you do your yin, and then sometimes you want to do some yang. And you just go with that. And the Taoist samadhi, if you like, is that person whose ego is not involved, but is just going with that flow. And but to do that, you have to let go and let go, let go and let go continuously. It's kind of the opposite of Patanjali yoga, if you like.
mhm, mhm.
Mm.
That's how I felt about it too, is that it's, Patanjali yoga to me always feels like a ladder, kind of like a vertical
Mm.
thing, whereas Taoism feels like a circle, like the yin yang. It's like, oh, we do this, and then we do this, and then that harmonizes so that we can, like, it just seems far more holistic, I guess you could say. It's interesting because I can, ever since I started doing this podcast, sometimes I can hear, not literally their voices in my head, but I could hear some of the things that yoga teachers will be saying.
Mhm.
Um, and I think one of them for sure is going to be, well, wait a minute. If we're embracing Taoism and we're going to just be, how the heck am I supposed to live in this modern world and get anything done? Like, I have kids to raise and taxes to pay, and
Mm.
and so I think finding the harmony of those two things that's the tricky part. But from my experience, both with myself, past Nick, and also just with people I work with, is that in our Western culture, especially, and of course it's also invaded Asia as well now, um, we're so yang dominant,
Yes.
with the go, go, push, push, like you said. Like when you said somebody's only getting 4 or 5 hours sleep, I like hurt inside. I'm like an 8 to 10 girl to be
Yeah.
like, to be my best. And I think that the hard part for us to realize sometimes is that we're so far yang that we almost have to over yin for a while so that we can then kind of come into some sense of harmony.
Yes. And how do you feel after doing your 2 years of yinning, and what's changed?
Oh, everything about my practice, for one. I realized that I had been so attached to and this happens a lot in Iyengar yoga because you don't even really study meditation, the asanas
Yeah.
as my yoga.
Mm.
So that aha of just being like, right. So I actually fell in love with yoga because of the relief it gave me for my anxiety.
Mm.
And then somewhere along the path to becoming a teacher and studying this deeper, I
You-
lost that, and I was all about the, like, I need to get my head to my knee in Janu Shashasan. I need to, like, vision board poses, and that 2 years allowed me to come back to actually what was the point of this practice in the beginning? So yes, the physical practices are great, but and starting to study with Paul and looking at yoga as a functional thing, I started looking at it in the grand scheme of my life too.
Mm,
What is the function of this yoga practice for me? Is it
exactly.
to become enlightened in this lifetime and be able to do cool handstands and look all impressive and have goal poses? Or is this a tool that I'm using to create wellness in my body so that I can actually live my life? And that was the big aha, was that
Mm,
I had turned it into one more thing to achieve when
exactly.
actually now what it is, and I think also age, this happens with age. I mean, I'm, 51 now. Now it's like anytime I'm going to do an asana, there's a function to it. Like I'm consciously going to think about if I'm going to, sometimes it's just play. Sometimes it's just free form play movement for sure. But a lot of times it's like, okay, what do I need? What needs to be addressed? And then I'm going to look for the shapes that have that function for my body. And that's going to be my practice. Because the rest of the time, to be honest, I want to be outside in the woodland area feeding the birds and the squirrels. Like I don't
Mm.
want to be working on some handstand thing when I could just be out in in nature in the moment. And so I would say that as far as the asana goes now, it's even more functional now for me. There's a need here that I have, or something's, gone off kilter. What can I use within my yoga repertoire to help with that so that I can be out of pain, sleep
So you
better?
have
Yeah.
tools. You have tools to navigate the journey of life.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas I think before it was very external.
And there you go. I think that's this yin yang balance. And we go through in the Indian tradition, you kind of have the journey from child to eventual, you go back to the forest.
Mhm.
There's a yang time of life, which is particularly into your late teens, into your early 40s, where you have to create your own wealth, maybe you have children. And then eventually kind of 50s and onwards is a more of a yin time. And so it doesn't, people often say like you have to be yinning out all the time. No, there are times, I think if you try to teach yin yoga to teenagers, teenagers maybe, but in a kindergarten, probably a bad idea. Um, that they want to be doing handstands and cartwheels and rolling around in the yoga mats. We have more chi as a young person. That's why give a baby a Red Bull or Coca-Cola, they're like explode because they're already full of chi. You give a Red Bull or Coca-Cola to someone in their 50s, they go, thanks for the energy. Their teeth might fall out. But so the Taoist kind of paradigm is becoming so comfortable with yourself. And another big, we talked about way and inaction, but another thing is 自然. 自然 is often translated as nature. And often you talked about it earlier, like you feel like Taoism has a big aspect of nature to it. 自然 is the word which is translated into nature. And 自然 doesn't mean nature. 自然, if you think about nature in English, it comes from the old word natura. I think it's a Latin word, which is kind of a classification of a part of the world, like there's humans and there's
Mm,
nature. Whereas 自然, 自 is one of the words. If you see Chinese people and you ask them, hey, you, and they go, who, me? They point to their nose like this. They go, hey, me. They don't do this. They go, hey, me. So the character for 自 is the finger pointing at your face.
interesting.
So it's reference to you. And then ran is a character of a bonfire with some food on it. So, or a barbecue essentially. So 自然 means self igniting, self perpetuating. I think maybe the best word is spontaneous.
Mm,
And if I listen to you, what the tools that you have, and you have your life and your teaching and all that stuff, but you also have tools so that you can nurture what spontaneously you as Nick, as a person this day, and when we're ever doing this podcast, you know how to bring out the stuff so the chi naturally flows through your body spontaneously. And that naturally gives you a feeling of happiness and not just long-term happiness, but contentment.
yes. Yeah. That was another thing that changed over that course. And actually, when I started studying TCM, is that I stopped looking for happiness
Hmm.
and tried to just embrace moments of contentment, which I think has far more longevity. Um, in Chinese medicine, I've said this in one of the episodes. I remember when I was studying it and they said that you can have too much joy. I was like, how the hell could you have
Yeah.
too much joy? Like, it doesn't compute to a Western brain. But then when I learned about it, if you have too much joy, it can scatter your heart chi. I was like, oh, and then you think about people like, when they win a brand new car or whatever and they faint because it's just like, it's too much. Like their system can't handle it. And around that time is also when I let go of even when I started doing my metta practice, often one of the first lines is, may I be happy. And I immediately switched it to, may I be content,
Mm.
because I feel like it is so much more reasonable and also so much more accessible,
Yep.
right? Like even in really stressful times in life, there can be a moment in your day or two or three or 10 or however long you allow where you can say, okay, what in this moment can I find some contentment here?
Yes.
You know? Yeah.
And you can only find that in one way, and that is through quiet.
Hmm.
That's yin, that's
Hmm.
qigong, that's meditation, that's a walk in the park, that's baking, that's gardening, whatever you do. And Eckhart Tolle is great at this. You have to be able to sit and simply just watch. However you do that, if it's yin yoga, your hamstrings, if it's qigong, like, holy crap, this is actually quite hard. Just really going really
Hmm.
painfully slowly. But because I realize I'm anxious, or I'm like, what's next?
Hmm.
What's next? So when can I do this faster? You realize there's a drive inside you which you're not comfortable with. You realize all the demons inside of you, and if you practice long enough and effectively enough, you'll start to also realize what gives you contentment. And so Taoism is, and that's the Zizan, why do some people like Harley Davidsons and other people like, walks in the forest? Why do some people do yin yoga and other people want to make millions of bucks? Why do some people want to live in that part of the country and other people in that country? Because life is diversity. And we've done that through our skeletal variation studies.
Hmm.
Like there's uh, cats are different from dogs. There's a great Taoist alignment kind of joke. Uh, Here, said the monkey to the fish, let me save you and pull you up the tree. And of course, the fish dies because the fish dies up the tree. But that's where the monkey thinks it's best. And so the Taoist approach is through all these practices, getting still, getting quiet, and naturally feeling how chi flows, the power of the universe throws and expresses itself through you, and how you dance with that.
Hmm.
And all of these texts are, and all of these practices are all about that. But our brain gets involved and says, really? Shouldn't I be doing this? Shouldn't I be doing that? And the dance between what's coming up from inside of you and what's coming down from maybe your parents or from community or from culture, that is the practice there. And to be healthy, to avoid cancer and anxiety and trauma, that dance that you just described between those two and figuring out the balance, that's your path. That's your Tao. That's
Hmm.
the path. And the word Tao often means path. That is the way that you will travel. And no one really can teach it to you. And that's why it's fun.
I think sometimes the hardest thing for people, and it probably was for me as well, it is I've always been pretty good at ignoring society's voices because I'm just rebellious by nature.
That's why
Um,
one of the reasons I have a huge respect for you. Yes.
yeah, I'm just like I've always been a questioner. That was credit to my mother. She didn't love it so much when I was a teenager, and I was also always questioning her. But one of the best ways that I find to start to pick apart these beliefs or these societal, whether it's your parents or just the world we live in, expectations of you, and to see, okay, well, what is actually for me versus what's been put on me, is to pause anytime that there's discomfort and your thoughts are going about something or your
Mhm.
judgments or you're shooting all over yourself. You're like, I should this, I should that. Is to just pause and say, is that true? Because something about just putting pause and the question in there. Is that true? It made a huge difference for me to just be like, wait a minute, is that true? And even when I first made that transition, when I was quite, ill and I had to move from hatha yoga practices into more sedentary stuff, I remember there was a lot of voices in my head. It's like, well, how can you be teaching these classes if you're not? Because I had my teacher's voice in my head of, you
Mm,
can't teach things that you don't practice. And so it was like, how can I be teaching warrior tonight at 5:45 when I'm not doing warrior in my practice? And then I had to pause and go, but you've done warrior thousands of times by now. It's not like I'm teaching something I've never embodied. It was
mm,
just right now I'm not doing warrior because that's what's wise for me. I can still teach it because I've done it thousands and thousands of times. But I find any time that there's a point in life where you're trying to shift habits, you know, that question of true is
yeah,
just such a powerful one.
yeah.
Yeah.
And what's true will change from day to day, sometimes week to week,
100%.
month to month. As a yogi, we're not famous for commitment. We have commitment issues often, like teach a class every Friday at that time. I think maybe another interesting way of talking about this is the definition of I. The Taoists are
Mhm.
massively interested in who we are, who you think you are. And most of us think we're this thing inside of here, and that's me.
Mhm.
And everything else, like everything else, is not me. And particularly if I work with young people, they have this massive anxiety. It's universe versus me in that mindset. So Taoist approach goes straight to the heart of this, who you think you are. We have it through our language, like my hair and my legs and my fingers and my nose and my heart beats. And then everything else is otherness. But actually, take a just rational approach to this. You cannot be you without the oxygen around you.
Mhm.
Just very simply, you could not be here if you didn't have the planet underneath you. You I couldn't be me if there wasn't you. Like there was just me and nothing else in the universe. How would I know I was me? So these very rational things. And if you extrapolate this all the way to its logical conclusion, well, there's no you without everything else. And therefore, this the separation between you and everything else is an abstract one that we make. And if you really meditate on that for a long time, actually, you don't exist. You're just like a star in the sky or a wave on a beach. And on the inside the wave, there's lots of little drops of water going, hey, actually, a wave is nice because you can go, the wave is kind of waving at the universe. So another way of thinking about this is who are you really? And it's not in the kind of Western sense, it's like I'm this person with this fashion and that's me. It's who are you really? You are the universe dancing in a way. You are a leaf floating
Love it.
on the wind. You are a star in the sky. You're a wave on the beach, and that's massive. I found that to be very useful for myself, but also for people I teach in teacher trainings, and also just in the clinic as well. That's
Dougal, I
also very
think that
different, I would say, to yoga theory. Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say, I think that last little bit there was probably a good place to start to wrap it up on, because I know
Mm,
you've got things to do. You got things to do, people to see, places to be. We probably do a 10-hour episode if we had the time. But I absolutely loved that as the kind of little icing on the cake. And of course, I'm gonna put links to all your stuff, and I'll put links to those books as well that you mentioned in the show notes. But before we totally wrap up, I do have some little icebreaker questions that I like to do with my guests. I guess an icebreaker means I should have done them in the beginning. So these are more like getting to know you questions. The first one is coffee or tea?
oh, I'm a total tea nerd. It has to be Chinese pu'er tea done properly. Yeah.
Nice. Favorite ice cream flavor?
I teach a lot in Italy, and I've been converted to pistachio.
Mm. One thing people often get wrong about me.
that I'm not in my 50s, because I think I was looking at you as well. I'm like, really? Are you? I'm not. I'm beginning to enjoy. I mean, I'm probably going to die of a heart attack now, having said this tomorrow. But if I look
I
at
just knocked on
people,
wood for you.
thank you. If I look around people our age, I think we're doing pretty good.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if you look back at like actors we all grew up watching and what they looked like in their 50s, and now you look at us, it's like, huh?
I haven't had any. Have you had any plastic surgery?
No, no Botox, no nothing, just,
Oh.
coconut oil and sleep. That's my beauty regimen. So yeah, that actually is one that people often get wrong about me too, my age.
Hmm.
Pop culture vice, like a show or a series or a podcast or
Uh,
something that you binge
pop,
on.
what is pop culture? Wow, I'm pop culture
This one's
vice.
always so hard for yoga people to answer.
Actually, I'm just going to come back to Star Wars. I think if you want to
Nice.
understand Taoism, where Yoda is teaching Luke Skywalker and he has to feel the Force, Luke. Chinese medicine and Taoism is just Star Wars. So let's just go with the
Star
oldest
Wars.
Star Wars.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be the title for this episode. Taoism
Feel,
and Chinese
feel the
medicine or
Force,
just Star
Nick.
Wars. Yeah. When I'm not practicing yoga or Qigong, I am.
I am bouldering with my kids.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's really amazing upper body strength. And I just love
Yeah.
the vibe of the weird out there alternative vibe of rock climbing people. Yeah.
So fun. One weird fact about you.
One weird fact about me. Um, I like Chinese karaoke. I think I said to you earlier. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Really
I've
like.
never done Chinese karaoke, of course, but
Uh, highly recommended.
okay.
Yeah.
What the world needs now is
Less people doing shit and more people being caring and compassionate.
mm, yes, yes. Here, here. One thing I wish people knew about Yin Yoga, and I know it's hard to just do one, but
Yeah. So that you need a really qualified teacher to teach it. Don't go to someone who's 200-hour teacher, but never trained in yin. That drives me crazy.
those of you who can't see me on the pod, I'm raising the roof on that one.
Yin is its whole own universe, and do yourself a favor and go to a teacher who spent a lot of time looking at this. You won't regret that at all.
100% agree. I
Just like,
often say when it's really a case of you don't know all that you don't know until you take a yin training. And then you're like, oh, there's so many layers to this.
yeah, I wouldn't teach Bikram because I've been to a couple of classes, but I wouldn't be able to teach it well. And
Yep.
it sounds dumb because yin is just lying around on the floor. I would be crazy. I think if I was the first person to say that when you asked this question, but it just seems like it's laying around the floor, but there's so much happening in there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Agreed. Is there anything else that I forgot to ask you about that you would like to add?
I play just another out there fact about me. I play an instrument called the guqin, which is like a guitar. Imagine you took a guitar and lay it down horizontal on a table
Yep.
and you pluck it.
I have a dear friend who she was in Calgary. Now she's in Vancouver, plays that quite well.
Yeah,
Yeah. She's
my favorite. I
mad
picked it up in
skills.
COVID and I'm having a blast with it.
Awesome. Well, my friend, thank you so much for coming out. I don't know where you are exactly, but you're in Toronto. So thank you for mentioning that you were going to be in Canada. That made this a lot easier. And of course, I'll put links to all your stuff in the bio. And we'll say our proper goodbye in a moment when I hit record off with the recording. For those of you listening or watching, bye for now.
Thanks for having me in.
My pleasure.